I just want to have a few more remarks about conversion. Then I'm going to go on to a new subject. We were discussing last week Yanim of Gerus, and you'll recall we talked about converting children below bar mitzvah, below bas mitzvah, and then we talked about the requirements for grown-ups, for adults, and then the last thing we talked about, I think, was about pregnant women. There are some unique problems when a woman is converted when she is pregnant. Now, the Gemara does tell us that when a pregnant woman goes to the mikveh to convert, that is a valid tevila, that's a valid immersion for the fetus as well. So even though the fetus was not in the water, if the mother is in the water, that is a valid tevila for the fetus. Even though there's a chatzitza, right? What is chatzitza? You're not supposed to have anything between you and the water. So how could the mother's body not be a blockage between the baby and the water? But the Gemara says, since the baby needs the mother to live, the baby cannot live without the mother's body is not a chatzitza, right? The word chatzitza is a barrier. So if you recall, just to go over a little bit very quickly, that conceptually there's some uncertainty. Everybody admits, in other words, the bottom line is that if a woman converts while pregnant and gives birth to a girl, the girl is Jewish. But the question is, why is the girl Jewish? Is the girl Jewish because she is a converted girl? In other words, since the fetus underwent a conversion, the girl is a georet? Or no, since the fetus was born, or since the baby was born, after the mother converted, the baby is a Jew by birth. In other words, the girl is for sure Jewish, but the question is she Jewish by birth, or is she Jewish by conversion? Now, there are a number of important differences here. If she's Jewish by birth or Jewish by conversion. And again, just to go over it quickly, difference one, can she marry a Kohen? The halacha is a girl who converts to Judaism cannot marry a Kohen, but a girl that is born from a convert to Judaism can marry a Kohen. So if the idea is her mother converted and she's just being born from a Jew, she could marry a Kohen. If she herself has undergone a conversion process, she could not marry a Kohen. That is difference one. Difference two, if it's a boy instead of a girl. A pregnant woman converts, and the boy is born. Now, a boy requires for conversion bris milah as well as immersion in the mikveh. So, if the idea is that the boy is a convert, he hasn't completed his conversion till he has a bris, which means, in other words, he would actually be a goy until his bris milah, as opposed to if he is born from a Jewish woman and doesn't need a conversion, he would be born Jewish. Difference three, so I gave you one difference for a girl, one difference for a boy. Difference three would apply both to boy and girl, and that is, when they reach bar mitzvah for a boy or bas mitzvah for a girl, do they have the right to renounce their conversion and say they don't want to be Jewish? If halachically they're born Jewish, then obviously there's no option to get out of it. If, on the other hand, it is deemed that they underwent a conversion in the uterus by the mother going to the mikveh, then it's like any other baby that is converted, and they would be able to renounce. So basically, there's a big machlokas. If halachically a fetus that was in the mother's womb when she converted, is that considered a converted fetus or a born Jewish fetus or born Jewish baby? And that would have these three practical differences. Because of this, because of these uncertainties, this is an uncertain halachic question. Generally speaking, a Beis Din will not want to convert a woman while she is pregnant. They will wait until the baby is born and then convert the mother and convert the baby as a baby, rather than convert her while she is pregnant, because there's a lot of uncertainty. In other words, halachic uncertainty, whether the child is a convert or the child is a born Jew, to avoid that halachic uncertainty, they will wait. Yeah.
Why would they just convert the woman while she's pregnant and have the child be considered a convert? Because that it's only like extra stuff. It's not like they're breaking anything by not marrying the Kohen.
No, that's true. That's true. But well, okay. In other words, just be machmir means just be machmir.
Right. But then.
Yeah, I understand. But
what about renouncing?
Yeah, renouncing would be a problem. You'd have the other problems too.
Oh.
Yeah. The renouncing issue would be a problem. As we want to be sure that they either have the right or don't have the right, and not be uncertain. Because if the kid renounces and we're not sure if he has the right to renounce, you don't know if you have a goy or a Jew, right? Not just a ger or a Jew, a goy or a Jew. Because once you renounce, when you can renounce, halachically you're a goy. So now let me mention a few other halachos, which are actually general halachos, but you're going to see how they impact on gerus. Do you know this halacha? You heard of this din? That when a woman, not about a ger, a regular Jewish woman, when a Jewish woman is divorced or widowed, she is not allowed to marry for 90 days, for 3 months. And that's not because of mourning, because the truth of the matter is, when a woman loses a husband, she only has to mourn for 30 days. And in any case, in the case of divorce, there's no mourning. But the reason why the halacha says she has to wait 90 days is we need to know that she is pregnant from her late husband or her former husband, or not pregnant, and it sometimes takes up to 90 days until a pregnancy is recognizable. Now, why do you need to know that? Because here is what the rabbis were afraid of. Let's say a woman gets divorced, and the next week or the next month, she marries a man, which the Torah would allow. And let's say she has a baby after 7 months or 8 months. We don't know if that is a premature baby to husband number 2 or a full-term baby to husband number 1. In other words, we don't know who the child's father is. And that's a very undesirable situation. So because of this, we wait 3 months, and by that time the pregnancy for sure would be recognizable, if there would be. And if there's no pregnancy, we know that any child the woman has, even if it's early, is from the second husband rather than the first husband. Right? This is a very important halacha. It applies to whether it's widowed or whether it's divorced. A woman must wait, I'll say 90 days. 90 days before she gets married. Now, even this halacha has a lot of complications. Does a woman have to wait if she's like 85 years old? I mean, let's assume she's way beyond the age of being able to have children. Is there a reason for her to have to wait? Let's say she had a hysterectomy. Or let's say she has a pregnancy test. Would that be good enough? If she can a woman get married within 3 months of death or divorce if she has a pregnancy test? How accurate are those tests, right? So these are different shilas. So I'm not suggesting right now that this is an absolute rule that you always have to wait 90 days, but pregnancy does have to be ruled out, because otherwise we might not know if a child that is born is premature to husband number 2, or full term, or a longer pregnancy of husband number 1, but with 3 months we would know, because 3 months a pregnancy is always going to be recognizable. Okay, now, halacha number 2, what if we wait 3 months and it turns out the woman is pregnant from obviously husband number 1? Or even if we don't wait 3 months, the man divorces or dies while she's pregnant. So you would think superficially, based on what I just said, let her get married right away if she wants, because we know this child belongs to husband number 1. Actually, no. There's another halacha, that a pregnant woman cannot, and this is true whether she's widowed, whether she's divorced, or whether she's out of wedlock. A pregnant woman cannot get married for 2 years. I'm sorry, more than that. 2 years following the birth. Meaning a woman that's pregnant cannot get married for until the baby is born and the baby is 2 years old. Now, why is that so? Why is that so? And that also means, by the way, if a woman has a child, she cannot get married till the child is 2 years old. In other words, these are two different halachas. I can't marry a pregnant woman, and I can't marry a woman with a young child until the child reaches the second birthday. Now, the reason might be a difficult reason to understand. That is, Chazal assumed that the optimal length of time for a mother to nurse a child is 2 years. It may be customary in modern society to wean a child earlier than that, but Chazal saw it as extremely beneficial to nurse a child with human mother's milk till the age of 2. There is a fear that if a man marries a woman that is pregnant or has a child under 2, the husband may try to stop her to nurse, to be more focused on his children and the like, and therefore potentially he might put her child at some level of risk, and therefore they basically said she should not marry until the child is old enough to be weaned. And even if he's weaned earlier than 2, Chazal say, still don't do it, because we don't want to encourage women to wean their children before the age of 2. Okay, so that's so we have these 3 halachas, meaning to say, if the woman doesn't know if she's pregnant, you got to wait 3 months. If after the 3 months she's not pregnant, she can get married. If, however, she is pregnant, you actually have to wait the length of the pregnancy plus 2 years in order to marry, because of this halacha that the new husband may try to terminate the nursing prematurely.
What is Chazal?
Chazal, I'm sorry, yeah. So Chazal is an abbreviation, and it stands for Chachamenu, our sages, Zichronam, their memory, Livracha, shall be a blessing. So we don't use the word Chazal for contemporary rabbis, even if they're very great. Chazal is a term that, in fact, we don't even use it for Rashi or the Rambam. Chazal is the particular term we use for the sages of the Mishnah, the Talmud, and the Medrash, right? So you wouldn't call Rashi even, as great as Rashi is, you wouldn't call them Chazal. Chazal is only for the Tanoim, which are the scholars of the Mishnah, and the Amoraim, which are the scholars of the Gemara. Sometimes it comes in a slightly different flavor. Instead of Chazal, you'll see Razal, which is the same thing. Razal means Rabosenu, Zichronim Lebracha, our rabbis of blessed memory. Okay, Chazal, Razal. Okay.
Razal and Chazal is the same thing?
Same thing. It's referring to the same group of people. Razal, yeah. If you have a real good memory, and a very good ear as well, you may notice that the word Chazal actually appears in a ketubah. If you've been to a chasna, so when they read a ketubah, so they actually mention either they'll say Chazal in there or Chachamenu Zichronim Lebracha. So they'll read it forward. The word actually appears in the standard text of a ketubah. Okay, alrighty. So now let me mention another aspect of 3 months that could apply to conversion. And this is really, really, some of it may be really, really crazy, very, very difficult. That is, when a single woman converts, she has to wait she also has to wait 90 days before she could marry. Now, again, I hope this will not insult anyone. The basis for this is that Chazal considered a non-Jewish woman to be largely promiscuous. And therefore it's so even though she's single, but the fear might be that she might be pregnant, and if she marries somebody, and there's a 7-month later a child, we're not going to know, is it from her non-Jewish past or is it from this husband? So every Gioris has to wait 90 days before she could marry. In fact, in most of the certificates, when a woman converts, not all, but some rabbis will write in that she is mutar, she is permitted to marry a Jewish man except for a Kohen, after 90 days from the date of this certificate. That's a language that often appears. Yeah.
Even if they were married to a Jewish man before, and during their marriage she converted?
Oh, no, so I'll get to that. Right? Remember, I'm going to give you different scenarios. Right now I'm talking about a single woman converts. Okay, now, let's talk about a married woman who converts. Right? A married woman who converts. Now, a married woman who converts, if you think about it, can be broken down into two cases. One is she was a guy married to a guy and they both convert. That's one scenario where it'll happen. Or the other scenario is, which you just said, that she was non-Jewish married to a Jew and she's converting. So both cases are possible, right? In other words, the one thing you're not going to have is you're not going to have a woman who converts who remains married to a non-converted guy, because if that's what she's presenting to the base, then they're not going to convert her. I mean, they're not going to convert a woman who remains married to a guy. So there's only two possibilities of a married woman. Either she is married to a guy and they're both converting, or she is married to a Jew and she's converting. Okay? So you would think in such a case, since she is staying with the same guy, whether he was a guy or a Jew, she is staying with the same guy, there would be no reason to wait 3 months before remarrying or even just continuing to live with each other. That's what you would think. But in point of fact, as strange as it is, for reasons that are a bit complicated, in those cases as well, when a woman converts and her husband converts, or a woman converts and her husband is Jewish, they have to separate, even though they're married. They have to separate 3 months before they can be together. Now, why is that so? In this case, there's no fear that she's pregnant from somebody else, because we're not assuming adultery, right? That's not our assumption. We assume that any pregnancy she has is from her husband. So what's the problem? If it's, right? So,
I just had a question about the separation. They can separate before they convert.
Yes, that's correct. They can do it two ways.
Yes.
You'll see why. They can separate before the conversion if they're living together, or they could separate after the conversion. But there has to be a period of 3 months where they don't have relations with each other. So the reason for this is a bit complicated. And let me explain this by the basic halachos, and then you'll understand why you need this separation. And that is, let's say a woman is a non-Jew, and she gets pregnant while she's a non-Jew, and then she converts. Now, we discussed the whole question about, but the kids are going to be Jewish for sure when they're born, right? That's not the question.
They will be?
Well, I discussed whether they're converted Jews or whether they're born Jews. That's fine, but they are going to be Jewish. So here is the problem. Let's say, let's take one consistent example. Let's assume her husband is Jewish. Husband Jewish, impregnates non-Jewish woman. She gives birth to a kid. Then after her conversion, he impregnates her again, and she gives birth to another kid. So these are 2 boys. Let's say they're 2 boys, right? Now the 2 boys, you would think, are brothers. They have the same father, the same mother. Halachically, actually, they're only related, they're only maternal brothers. They are not paternal brothers. Why is that so? Because a Jewish man has no paternity to a child that he impregnated from a non-Jew. Okay? You're following me here. In other words, very simple. If a Jewish man impregnates a non-Jewish woman, and let's assume the non-Jewish woman gives birth to a guy, right? Without a conversion, that father is not related to that child. Now, not only is the father not related to that child if the woman doesn't convert, but even if the woman converts, the Jewish man is not related, because at the time he impregnated her, she was a non-Jew. Okay, this is a halacha that I think a lot of people wouldn't automatically know. Okay, let me say this again. If a Jewish man impregnates a non-Jewish woman, he does not have paternity of the child that is born. And it makes no difference if the woman didn't convert, so the child was born a goy, or even if the woman converted and the child was born a Jew because it was born from a Jewish mother, but the Jewish husband does not have... Now again, technically he would be like an adopted parent. Certainly you'd love him, you'd honor him. That's not the issue I'm talking about. But in terms of strict paternity...
But what does that in practice?
Huh?
What does that have to do with anything?
With what?
What the technical paternity is?
Oh, it has to do with a lot. Number one, it has to do with Yerusha, inheritance. A person dies, his sons inherit property. If it's not his son, that son will not inherit property unless there's a will. You can make a will. Or another example would be Yibum. Again, what's the mitzvah of Yibum in the Torah? The mitzvah of Yibum in the Torah says, if a man dies without children, there is a mitzvah on his paternal brother from the same father, to either marry the widow to perpetuate the seed of the deceased, or if he does not want to, or he's already married, or she does not want to, there's a ceremony. Right, you've heard of this? There's a ceremony called chalitza. Chalitza, fascinating ceremony. She takes off, he wears a special boot, like a Viking boot, strapped all the way up on the leg, no sock, right? And she pulls the boot off his foot in front of a beis din, and she spits in front of him, not in his face. Sorry, literally, she spits in his face. She spits in front of him, and she says, "So shall be done to the man who does not rebuild." It's said in Hebrew, who does not rebuild his brother's home. Chalitza. By the way, among Ashkenazim, we don't even give him the Yibum option. Even if he says he wants to marry his brother's wife, we do not practice Yibum. Ashkenazim do not practice Yibum, but we do have to have Chalitza. A woman who does not have children from her husband, and there's a brother, she is not allowed to marry until she gets a Chalitza ceremony. Chalitza is like a get for this particular usage. I remember, chalitza is pretty rare. You don't see so many chalitzas. It doesn't happen that often.
Have you ever seen?
I only saw one once, and I tell you what happened. It was a very interesting thing. The widow her husband was not religious, and the widow was not religious, so she didn't care. But the dead brother's the dead man's brother was a Baal Tshuva, and he was very, very concerned that he wanted to give his sister-in-law chalitza. He wanted to follow the halacha. So she agreed to a chalitza just to humor him. She didn't know what it was at all. So she wasn't religious. Now, since chalitza is so rare, when people heard about it in Baltimore, 500 people came
To what?
to watch the chalitza. And the woman walked in. The woman didn't care about this. The woman thought, they told her this would be like a little thing, it'll take 5 minutes. It does take 5 minutes, it doesn't take a long time. She walks in, and she sees 500 people staring at her. She almost fainted, like she kind of broke down. The rabbis had to take her into a private office. So there was kind of an invasion of privacy. So the truth of the matter is, since I was kind of in the back of the 500 people, I didn't really see it that well. But you can see it on YouTube. You can see a Khalid. You can see no, not that one. But you can actually see. And it's interesting that I once looked at a Khalid on YouTube, and it was actually very, very moving because, it brought back, to the wife, the widow, it brought back the memory of her husband, and to the brother, It brought back the memory of his brother. And they both were crying. And I remember that they were passing tissues to each other because each one was thinking about the one that was nifter. So it was beautiful in that particular way. But this is chalitza. But now let me point out, this is really a long-winded answer to your question. The only time there is yibum or chalitza, yibum is the marriage, which we don't do today, is only if the brother shares the same father. But if the brother does not share the same father, even if they share the same mother, there is no requirement of a yibum or a chalitza, and the widow is free. So, consider this hypothetical. Again, this is pretty complicated hypothetical. A Jewish man impregnates a non-Jewish woman. She then converts, and the child is born. He then, after the conversion, impregnates her again, and another child is born, 2 boys. 20, 30, 40, 50 years later, one of those boys dies without a child. Does the other boy, he's a man by now, have to give yibum or chalitza? The answer is no, because although biologically those 2 brothers come from the same father, halachically they do not share the same father, because the second child has the paternity of the Jewish man. The first child does not. So when you ask me, what's the practical difference? Who's the father? This is exactly the practical difference. Whether it be chalitza, Yerusha, for example, the second kid would get all of the father's property, unless there's a will. The first kid would not. Okay? So now you understand a little bit why, going back to your, someone asked the question, even if a non-Jew is married to a Jewish man and then converts, you have to wait 3 months. Because if you don't wait 3 months and there's a 7-month birth, how do we know if it was a post-conversion pregnancy or a pre-conversion pregnancy? Because if it's a post-conversion pregnancy, that would give the Jewish man paternity. If it is a pre-conversion pregnancy, the Jewish man would not have paternity, and therefore you got to wait 3 months in such a case. Now that does mean, think about this, this could be an enormous hardship. This means if a Jewish man is married to a Jewish woman, married to a non-Jewish woman, and that's forbidden, it's an intermarriage. But finally, we were makarev them, so the woman is ready for an Orthodox conversion. They have to be separated for 3 months, either before the conversion or after the conversion, to determine there's no pregnancy. Now, it's one thing to tell a single woman that you don't get married for 3 months. That's not such a big deal usually. It's another thing to take a married couple and say, you got to be separated. And what if the married couple has children already? Are you telling me that the husband and the wife cannot live under the same roof for 3 months? Which usually means the husband moves out. That's usually what it means. This is an enormous hardship. I remember myself a case, there were friends of ours, where the Jewish man was married to a non-Jewish woman, and they became religious, and the woman converted, and the rabbi paskins that the husband, and they already had a little daughter who was also converted, they had a child, that the man had to move out of the house for 3 months. I still remember this. This was like 40 years ago. The man was going absolutely crazy. He was going nuts with his daughter and this and that. It was like a tremendous, tremendous, tremendous hardship. And yet that is the halacha. But as I say, the way out is that many rabbis, not all, many rabbis will rely on a pregnancy test. That if at the time of her conversion she has a pregnancy test that she is not pregnant, they will waive the 3-month requirement because we assume there's no pregnancy. So that's what I do myself when I'm faced with that type of situation. But there are some rabbis that say no. Some rabbis will actually impose 3 months. And you could imagine, in the case of an intermarriage, where there are children, little children, that's an enormously difficult point. Because again, we don't trust people to live in the same house and not have relations. In other words, if the halacha is you can't have relations for 3 months, the only psak we will tell them under those circumstances is the husband has to move out. He can't say, well, let me stay in the house and whatever. That doesn't work. Yeah.
Back to the paternity thing.
Yeah.
Say 2 non-Jewish people had children, and then only the parents converted.
Okay, so let's take that situation. Theoretically, that's possible. There's no obligation to convert your non-Jewish children, right? Non-Jew, have kids, not Jewish. Both parents convert to Judaism. Maybe the kids are not interested. I think if they're young children, it would be extremely rare not to convert them, but they might be adult children, and they don't want to convert. So in such a situation, a conversion also cuts away paternity and maternity. So technically, they are related to neither parent under those circumstances. Now, again, I do want to be very, very clear because some people here or might come from mixed families, that I know that sometimes sounds very, very harsh. I want to point out that when it comes to the love and the care and the gratitude and the emotional sharing that people have, I don't mean to suggest, a person converts, that wipes out, you're not my mother, you're not my father. That's not the way it works in real life. The person who raised you, the person who took care of you, you love them as a mother and a father. We're not talking about emotional feelings here. But halachically, there are certain consequences in terms of yibum, in terms of inheritance, right? So, in a way, I don't mean to be cold about this because I'm not denying the reality of human relationships, and you shouldn't either. Meaning, don't internalize these halachos as referring to how you relate to your family. They are halachos, so you talk to a posek exactly how it plays out. But we're not talking about you're not my father anymore, you're not my mother anymore. That's not the way you look at it. Yeah.
So I'm wondering about what you were saying about the moving out thing, because I have a friend right now who's doing Gior, and her husband's Jewish. She's doing it, and she has a son from a previous marriage. And so they told him you have to wait until you're 13 to even do it, and he's going to Jewish day school and everything like that. But for her, they told her, and she just told me this, they're having her husband move out like way in advance. She's more than like, I think she's still like more than 6 months away from her like third Beit Din meeting. She's about to have her second.
So
and like she's totally worried about her son being traumatized.
That's a big problem, but I think that might be a different dynamic. That might be not so much for pregnancy reasons. That might be in order to test her sincerity as a convert, she has to agree not to live with a Jewish man in sin.
Just in terms of like that being like...
Right. So again, although in terms of pregnancy, you could do the 3 months after the conversion, but many Batei Din will say you got to separate right away. In fact, many Batei Din will say even a year before the conversion. Now, I'm a little surprised when there's a child involved, and I hope they're not discriminating because it's not his child, but it might be that they say, it's not your kid anyway, so... I don't agree with that, but that might be what's going on. Okay, yeah.
So, this can be tabled, but something that you said last week has just been bothering me all the
Yeah.
time.
Uh-huh.
And it was that if a Jew is required to break Shabbat to save another Jew's life,
Yep.
but they can't break Shabbat to save a non-Jew's life.
Yeah. So this is actually considered to be one of the most difficult halacha to understand in the totality of Jewish law. And all I can tell you is there is a big difference between the letter of the law and how it is applied in practice. The letter of the law is actually very, very clear, and that is the permissibility to violate the Shabbat is only to save the life of a Jew and not to save the life of a non-Jew. Now, I can't deny that statement. That is a statement in the Mishnah and in the Gemara, that Shabbos cannot be desecrated to save the life of a non-Jew. However, in practice, we ignore this because we have let's take a very simple example. If, God forbid, you're walking and a non-Jew has a heart attack, are you allowed to drive him to the hospital? Are you allowed to call 911? Are you allowed to call Hatzalah? If I just read the Gemara, the answer would be no. but the practicalities is the answer is yes. Now, the reason that's given for the yes may not be ethically satisfactory, but it works practically, and that is, there is a concept that if a Jew would not endeavor to save the life of a non-Jew, that would incite a great deal of hatred and animosity from non-Jews who might literally kill Jewish people in retaliation and revenge. And therefore, my heter to violate the Shabbat for a non-Jew is that it ultimately may protect Jewish lives. Now, as I say, ethically, some people are not so comfortable because that still means you're not really... Yeah. But one way of looking at it in terms of ethically understanding it is, it's not that non-Jewish lives are less important, but rather Shabbos is so important that you can only desecrate Shabbos for those who will keep the Shabbos. And therefore, those who don't keep the Shabbos, we don't desecrate. Now, you may ask me, well, then how come I could violate Shabbos for those who are not observant? They don't keep Shabbos. Yeah, they don't keep Shabbos now, but since they're Jewish, they're potentially, right? So look at it this way. It's not that the non-Jew is less, it's that Shabbos is so great that, right, as the Gemara says, violate one Shabbos, so the person will be able to keep many Shabbos. By the way, that's saying,
Thank you.
right? The heter of violating Shabbos is better to violate one Shabbos now, so this person will be able to keep many Shabbos. This is actually an interesting, I'm going to digress for a moment, totally off topic, but it's connected to this statement. You know, one of the, I don't know what Chabad's psak is, I don't know exactly what, but I'll just tell you what the question is generally. That is, let's say you run an outreach organization, right? You run you're a shaliach, whatever it is. And your events, or your services, or your meals, you know that people are going to drive to your event. Are you allowed to invite somebody to your home, to your shul, to your Chabad house, to whatever it is, if you know that they are going to desecrate Shabbos by coming to you? Yeah, you know that. Now, normally, you're not allowed to cause a Jew to sin. That's called, in front of a blind person, you don't put a stumbling block. Right? I can't cause people to sin. So am I allowed to cause somebody to sin by inviting them? Right? So this is a big shaila. It comes up a lot. And the basic psak, again, different rabbis will paskin differently, is that if this is a mechanism by which there is a chance, even though you don't know for sure, that in the long run they may wind up keeping Shabbos, then we go with the idea that even if they're desecrating Shabbos now, it's done for the purpose of them keeping many, many Shabbos. And not only that, but even for the single Shabbos, you may be ahead. It's hard to compare. On one hand, you're causing them to sin by driving to your minyan. Okay, but what if they wouldn't come to your minyan? How many more sin? In other words, it's hard to. In other words, it's not necessarily the case that they're worse off even for this Shabbos than they would be if they wouldn't come, because if they drive on this Shabbos and they spend 3 or 4 or 5 hours there, right? Look at all the things that they are doing positively and all the things negatively that they're not doing, right? So it might be they're actually coming out ahead. The only condition is you do have to offer them accommodations. In other words, you can't invite somebody who's going to drive unless you make it clear to them at some point that they're welcome to stay for the whole Shabbos and you will give them a comfortable place. So at that point, you've given them the possibility of keeping the whole Shabbos, and then they make their own decision, and then you can allow them to come because you're ultimately hoping to bring them to a state where they're Shomer Shabbos.
Does this option have to be given like the first time they come, or is it something that?
You don't have to tell them every time, but you the first time they come, you should tell them that any time you would like to stay, we'd love to have you stay for all of Shabbos.
And explain to them the reason why.
Yeah, but again, you don't want to drive them away by saying you can't drive. But in a nice, gentle way, you say it's a wonderful thing to experience a whole Shabbos from the beginning to the end, etc. So that's again. I don't know. I mean, shluchim must have a whole set of psukim because certainly many people in Chabad houses drive. I mean, that's a very well-known thing. So I am assuming they're following this type of approach. Rav Moshe Feinstein was very strict on it. He basically said you can't invite somebody if you know they're going to drive. But most poskim today have been more lenient on this matter, and it goes back to the same idea. Better to desecrate one Shabbos in order that many Shabbases will be kept. Same idea. Let me give you another example where this comes up. Not about Shabbos, a totally unrelated example. Do you know there's a halacha in the Shulchan Aruch that you're not allowed to give food to somebody, or water even, if they're not going to make a bracha? I am not allowed to give somebody food or even a drink of water if they're not going to make a bracha, because since it is a sin to eat or drink without a bracha, I am causing them to sin. This is in the book. Shulchan Aruch says this. So now let's consider this problem. It's 100 degrees outside, and your air conditioner is not working. So you call the repair guy to show up, and the repair guy is not religious, right? And it's 100 degrees, and the repair guy asks you for a glass of water. Are you supposed to say, well, I can't give it to you unless you make a bracha? Right? What's going to happen? So Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach paskins, in such a case, it's true that when you give him the water, you're causing him to sin by not making a bracha. But if you don't give him the water, you're going to cause a greater sin. He's going to hate Judaism. He's going to hate Orthodox Jews. He's going to think people are selfish. And therefore, if Shlomo Zalman Auerbach says, not only do you give him water if he asks for it, but you offer it. You actually initiate it. Say, can I give you a drink? Can I give you something to drink? Because you see, you have to look at everything by comparison. You can't just say, oh, I'm causing you to sin. You have to ask yourself, well, what would I be causing if I don't give him the water? And if what I'm causing by not giving the water is worse than what I'm causing by giving him the water, I go with the lesser thing. Same thing with Shabbos. Oh, I'm causing him to drive. Well, if I didn't cause him to drive, he would never have a Shabbaton. He would never be exposed to Shabbos. So maybe it's mutter to do something wrong if the long-term benefit is going to be positive. Now, you have to be careful not to abuse that. That can be abused for sure. But there is such a cheshbon based on the principle, better to desecrate one Shabbos in order to have more Shabbos. But that's why there would be a difference between something like a Shabbaton and, let's say, a pure social event. For example, if I'm just making a bar mitzvah, and there's no educational component, I'm not going to be giving classes, and I just invite people who are going to drive. Maybe that's usher. Just to invite people, just to show up, if there's no program, so to speak, then maybe you shouldn't, right? That's a different thing. But when you have a program, a special meal that's geared to bring people closer to Judaism, that might be a different cheshbon. So it really depends on why you're inviting them and what you're going to be offering them and the like. Yeah.
How is the thing about violating one Shabbos in order to keep more Shabbos later? How is that any different from the train problem where you save one? You kill one person in order to save a whole group of people.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting analogy. In other words, we normally don't say that one life is more important than we don't say many lives are more important than one life. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I understand. It's a good point. But on the other hand, I think here the idea is you're dealing with one person, and in such a situation, obviously, with respect to one person, I can't compare one person's Shabbos with another person's Shabbos, but I can certainly say about one person that for you to keep 100 Shabbos is better than you keeping one Shabbos. I mean, so there's a clear gain in these types of situations.
Well, you could also say that, letting 100 people live is certainly better than letting one person live.
Well, yeah, but you don't know that for sure. You don't know that for sure because it's shayach. It's shayach. I mean, you could think of one person who may be greater than 100 people, right? I mean, we can imagine in our own eyes that way.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a little different than I think this type of comparison. Okay? All right, so how did I get onto this? I don't know. I think it was one of the questions that was raised. Okay, but does everyone understand why even the non-Jewish woman who's married to a Jewish man would have to wait 3 months, and the same thing if he's married to a non-Jewish man would have to wait 3 months for the same reason? The 3 months can be before or after the conversion, and as I say, you could get rid of the whole problem with a pregnancy test. In fact, it's very common today. Today, it's very common, and I've done this I've done it a lot of times myself, in which, let's say you have a Jewish man and a non-Jewish woman, and she converts, so they have to be remarried because their marriage was not valid, that we do the remarriage the same day she went to the mikveh. Even though you might say, how could that be? We didn't wait 3 months. So we're somech, we rely on pregnancy tests for something like this.
If they separated before?
No, even if they didn't separate before. That's what I'm saying. Many poskim will allow a pregnancy test to eliminate this. Although, as I say, I mean, the one Rav that I knew, actually, he was a Chabad Rav. It's interesting that he insisted on absolutely 3 months. He was an older Rav. He was he's not alive anymore. Anyone here from Australia? No. Okay. So in Australia, the head shaliach in Australia is a Rav Pinchas Feldman. So this was his father, Rav Mendel Feldman. Rav Mendel Feldman, Zichrono Livracha, was actually a shaliach of the Frierdiker Rebbe, going all the way back then. And I remember, he made them separate 3 months, even though they had a child. But many Rabbanim are makel with pregnancy tests today. Okay, so that's kind of what I wanted to share with you about conversion. And we now move to a new topic, which is kind of related, really. And I want to talk about marriage and divorce generally. We've been talking about reproduction, having children, abortion, right? We've been talking about those things. Let's talk about marriage itself. First, there is a mitzvah we know of being fruitful and multiply. Is there a mitzvah to get married? In other words, is marriage just a means to pru or vu, be fruitful and multiply? Or is marriage in itself considered to be a mitzvah? Let's assume a person knows, either the man or the woman or both, that they're not able to have children. Is there still a mitzvah on them to enter into what is called marriage? In other words, is marriage a means to an end? Or is marriage intrinsically something holy and something good? So the truth of the matter is, the Rambam actually says in Sefer HaMitzvos that marriage itself is a mitzvah. Marriage itself is a mitzvah. And there's a beautiful interpretation of this in an earlier event in the Chumash. Do you remember one of the when Rachel says to Yaakov, Leah keeps on having all these kids, and Rachel has no children, and Rachel says to her husband Yaakov, he says, "Give me children," meaning pray for me to have children, and without children, I want to die. She says, without children, I am like a dead person. Either I want to die or I'm like a dead person. So if you remember, Yaakov said something that is really, really pretty shocking. He said, am I in the place of God who has withheld from you children? In other words, I don't have a problem. I have plenty of kids. God has withheld children from you. So why are you bothering me? Now, this is a very, very shocking statement to make. And indeed, the Medrash, Chazal, actually criticized Yaakov for this. And Chazal say, is this how you talk to a woman in pain? By saying, it's your problem because I don't have a problem. I have kids. You don't talk that way. So how do we defend Yaakov? Yaakov is a great tzaddik, right? You can't just say, Yaakov was insensitive. There has to be some deeper meaning for what Yaakov is doing. So there's a sefer, a classic sefer in Jewish philosophy. It's called the Akedas Yitzchak. They're not referring to the Akedah, just the author was Rabbi Yitzchak Arama, who was one of the great philosophers among the Rishonim. And he says the following, that it's true that Yaakov maybe said something that Chazal say was not right, but he said it out of love, not out of disdain. And here's how it works. When she makes the statement, if I don't have children, I might as well be dead, she's basically saying the only purpose of a marriage is to have kids. And that hurts Yaakov. Yaakov is saying, is that all your life is? Is that all who you are? There is something kadosh in our relationship, even if there are no children. So his, what you might call insensitive response, comes because he wants her to realize that having children is a beautiful thing and it's a very important thing, but it is not the sole definition of the holiness of a marriage. A marriage is holy, godly, because of the relationship of the husband and the wife to each other, even if it doesn't turn into children.
Is that also with Elkanah and Hannah?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And that's what Elkanah is telling Hannah. Why? Right? Hannah is crying. She has no children. And Elkanah says, I am better to you than 10 sons, meaning rejoice. Now, listen, infertility is a problem that all people, may suffer, meaning any religion. Certainly for a religious Jew, infertility is probably more painful than for other people because of the great mitzvah of having a child. And there's an organization, they have a website, it's called A-Time. It's an abbreviation for something, A-T-I-M-E. And it's a religious organization that gives chizuk, gives support for couples that are going through infertility, both in terms of the avenues they could explore to have children, but also the comfort that they need, the comfort and the chizuk, that if, God forbid, they don't have children, but they could still, relish the relationship that they have. That's a very, very important idea, that marriage is not just a means to have children, although it is, but marriage is good in and of itself. What does the Torah say? Lo tov, heyosa adam levado. It is not good for man to be alone. I will make a helpmate to be opposite. By the way, the Meforshim say, why isn't it good for man to be alone? After all, this is in the Garden of Eden. In the Garden of Eden, Adam has whatever he wants, except for one tree he can't eat from, right? He has everything. He doesn't need a wife to cook for him. He doesn't need a wife to do laundry for him. What's so bad about being alone when you're in Gan Eden? And the Meforshim say, because when man is in a state of aloneness, he has the infinite capacity to take whatever he wants. But he has no one to whom to give. And Hashem is the ultimate giver, because Hashem does not take. Hashem only gives. And Hashem is called Tov. Right? So man cannot be Tov. Man cannot be godly unless man gives. So marriage was created so we become givers rather than takers. It is not good, meaning man cannot be good in a state of aloneness. Okay, so that's what marriage is. And again, it's not. You're not yet there in this parsha, at least most of you. But it's important that even when you become Abba and Ima, even when you become father and mother, you still have to be husband and wife. And that sometimes goes by the wayside because we're so busy with our children that we don't really focus on the relationship. The Rebbe himself used to come every afternoon. He used to come home in the middle of his day to have tea with the Rebbitzin every day. And he once told somebody, he says, this is as important to me as putting on tefillin. That's something to think about. And it was funny because, there were a lot of, the Rebbitzin often, there were people who would be over talking to the Rebbitzin, whatever it is, and when the Rebbe would show up in the middle, they would jump out of the window. They were so, just in the middle, he just shows up. And he said, he's telling, you can stay if you want, it's okay, but they kind of just jumped out of the window, whatever it was. Yeah.
I was told that there's 3 categories of brachas, health, parnisa, and children, but
Yeah.
that some marriage is, and maybe that's not correct.
Yeah.
Is that correct? Have you did something correct?
Well, when you say 3 types of brachas are on what? What do
I
you...
guess that they were saying like you ask for bracha, and of course you could ask for anything, but that there's 3 primary categories, major categories.
Yeah,
Health.
children, life, which is health, and parnasa.
So marriage, how would marriage fit into that if you can't have children anymore?
Well, a marriage fits in because it's life. Marriage falls under life. Because indeed it says that a person who's not married is not fully alive. Because once again, the idea is that it's the union of male and female that creates a perfection. A person not married is half. Either I'm the male or I'm the female, whichever half I am, I'm only half. And I complete myself that way. So I would consider that to fall within life itself. Okay? So now what I want to go over is I want to go over the structure of the Jewish marriage ceremony because it's very, very interesting. It actually was 2 different ceremonies that used to be a year apart, and now we stick them together. So when you go and you watch a chasna, you are seeing 2 different things that used to be separated by 12 months. Stage 1 of marriage is called erusin. Now, this is very important because modern Hebrew is going to confuse you. In modern spoken Hebrew, the word erusin means engagement. So somebody says, I am making an erusin. That means like a l'chaim or a vort, right? Erusin. But that's modern Hebrew. That's not the language of the Torah, and that's not the language of Chazal in the Gemara, the Mishnah or the Gemara. Rather, the way it worked would be the following. If you would be getting married in the time of the Torah, or even in the time of the Gemara, right? You'd be in the time of the Gemara. The way it would work would be this. At some point, when you've decided to get married, the chassan would give you a ring. It doesn't have to be a ring, and it's something worth money, a penny, a pruta, and say in front of 2 witnesses, Harei at mekudeshes li, you are married to me with this money or this ring. It doesn't have to be. A ring is a minhag. There are reasons for it. But the point is, kedushin is effected by giving some monetary value to the woman. And when she says yes, that was the end. That was called erusin. She's not engaged. She is a married woman. If she commits adultery, she's chayav misa. She gets the death penalty. But the minhag was, she then went back to her father for a whole year. The marriage was not consummated. For an entire year. She's a married woman, but her parents are still supporting her, if she was being supported by her parents, for an entire year. And during that year, she is called an arusa. But she is an Eishes Ish. She is married. Now, 1 year later is part 2. Everybody would get together. 7 brachos would be recited. A kesuva would be written. And then the marriage would be consummated by bringing her into his house. And that is called nisu'in. And the woman is now called a nisu'ah, a married woman. So erusin is just the giving of the ring, or the money really. Nisu'in are sheva brachos, kisuva, and consummation. But consummation didn't have to be at that point. I mean, it would be actual intercourse, but it could just be bringing her into his home. That's really the consummation we're talking about. And that's called nisu'in, which means they didn't have a ksuva in stage 1. And they didn't have sheva brachas in stage 1. Everything would be late, would be at that later point. Okay, erusin and nisu'in. Now, if you look at a Jewish wedding, you will actually see that we combine erusin and nisu'in. Because let's just look at, I'm not going to talk right now about the pre-chuppah events. Let's just talk about the chuppah events. There is the giving of the ring. There is the reading of the ksuva. There is sheva brachos. And then the chassan and the kala go into a private room. So the giving of the ring is ersin. The kesuva, the sheva brachos, and the yichud is nesuin. Yichud is the private room. Is the nesuin. So in the time of the Gemara, and certainly the time of the Torah, they were separated by a year. So who unified them? Who put them together, and why were they put together? So the unification of Erison and Nisuin actually was in the time of Rashi. Some in fact credit it to Rashi. Rashi lived, it's after the Gemara, Rashi lived in the 1000s, and Rashi felt that a prolonged period of erusin was too hard for a married couple, and it was conducive to immorality. Immorality either in the sense of committing adultery, or immorality even in terms of the man and the wife being together, because until there were the sever brachos, they were not allowed to do that. So therefore Rashi collapsed it and made a takana, made an enactment that it should be one single ceremony. But originally it was two ceremonies, and that explains something that you might notice. The halacha is that the marriage ceremony should always be accompanied by a glass of wine, Borei Pri Hagafen, because it's a simcha. Now, you may notice the following. Let's go over the actual order of the marriage ceremony, and then you'll see the question. The chassan and the kala are under the chuppah. Okay, well, I'll talk a little later about the preliminary stuff. They're both under the chuppah. So the rabbi who is in charge of marrying them, he's called the Misader Kedushin, the one who arranges the marriage, recites a blessing over the wine, Borei Pri Hagafen. Then he recites a blessing over the mitzvah of marriage. And then the chassan and the kala take a sip of the wine. Remember, they were fasting, or many people were fasting that day. This is the first thing they have. And then the chassan gives the ring, puts the ring on the kala's finger, Harayat Mekudeshet Li, right? You are married to me with this ring, according to the laws, Kedas, Moshe, Yisrael, right? According to the laws of Moshe and Yisrael.
They did the 7 brachos first.
No, they didn't do seven. No, they didn't do 7 brachos. They did a blessing on, that's not seven brachos. They did the blessing on the wine, and a blessing on the mitzvah of marriage, only 2 brachos.
And the witnesses have to be Jewish, 2 Jewish witnesses.
Yeah. So there are many halachos about witnesses. The witnesses have to be 2. They have to be Jewish. They have to be men. They cannot be related to the chassan or the kala or to each other. And most importantly, they have to be halachically observant. So they have to be Shomer Shabbos witnesses. I remember, it still embarrasses me a little bit, I was talking to a Rebbe of mine at a wedding once, and somebody went over to the Rebbe, and he wanted the Rebbe to be a witness under the chuppah. So the Rebbe said, well, I don't want to be a witness under the chuppah because, I don't know, maybe I chew my nails by accident on Shabbos, so I feel I'm not. So the guy then he started, okay, you be a witness instead.
Wow.
What am I supposed to do? I mean, my own Rebbe said he felt he wasn't religious enough, so how could I say that I was? But whatever it was, but that's important, okay? So two men, Jewish, not related to each other or to the chassan or the kala, and halachically observant. That's why the Rav will often tell them, before you witness the marriage, do tshuva in your heart. So in case you are a sinner, Hashem forgives your averos, and then you're able to be a kosher witness. Now this is not Sheva Brachos. This is a blessing over the wine and a blessing over the mitzvah of getting married. Okay? Now, so then the ring ceremony is given. Okay, the ring is given. And then a second cup of wine is poured. A second cup of wine, upon which 7 brachos are recited. The first one being, once again, Borei Pri Hagafen. So here's the question. Why do you have 2 cups of wine? You have 2 cups of wine. just have 1 cup of wine that covers the marriage ceremony. Why do you need 2 cups of wine? The answer is because originally these were 2 ceremonies that were a year apart. It's only now they're all together. But we have the first cup of wine is for the Erusin ceremony, and the second cup of wine is for the Nesuin ceremony. Okay? So this actually means it's a different picture than you would think, because the picture you have under a chuppah is that the Sheva Brachos is the end of the chuppah. You look at the Sheva Brachos as the end. It's not the end. It's the beginning of part 2. In other words, part 1 are blessing over wine and blessing over mitzvah of marriage, and then sipping the wine. Chassan giving ring to Kala with Hareyat Mukadeshet. That's part 1. Part 2 is Sheva Brachos and Yichud Rum. That's part 2. So Sheva Brachos is the beginning of the second ceremony, not the end of it. And the Yichud Rum is supposed to represent basically the Chassan bringing the Kala into his home. And that's why halachically it's very, very proper that the Chassan has to have some ownership of the Yichud Rum, and that ownership is by paying a rental, that the Chassan should actually say, pay $1 to have, it's a limited ownership, to own that Yichud Rum for an hour or whatever it is. Because it's important, because the whole essence of Yichud is, obviously it's not consummation, hopefully not. They're not physically consummating the marriage in the Yichud Rum, but the Yichud Rum is bringing the Kala into his home. So it has to be his home. So a rental home is also your home. You don't have to own it, but you do have to rent it. So a chassan should actually pay, $1 or whatever it is, to rent this particular room. That's very important because it has to be his home. That is the idea of yichud. Bringing her into my home is how I make nisuin. Okay, now there are many, many customs we'll talk about, but I want you to understand the basic essence of the ceremony. The idea of erusin and nisuin, and today we do it all together in one big ceremony, and that is why we have 2 glasses of wine. Now, there's also another Sheva Brachos, which is a separate thing, and that's Sheva Brachos after the Seudah. There is a festive meal, and at the end of...
When is the ksuba read?
The ksuba is read between Erusin and Nisuin. Now this is an interesting point as well. Let me explain something about the reading of the ksuba. First of all, what is a ksuba? Right? So a ksuba is a document signed by witnesses, and essentially the husband declares that he will fulfill all the obligations of a Jewish husband during the marriage, and also in the event of his death or divorce, he will give his wife sums of money. Maybe we'll talk a little later about what the money would be. And that's the ksuba. The ksuba is signed by witnesses. Again, same. They could be the same witnesses or different witnesses, but the same requirements. Men, 2, non-related, Shomer Shabbos. The ksuba is the woman's property. She has to know where it is at all times. If she ever loses her ksuba, she is not allowed to live under the same roof with her husband until she gets a replacement ksuba. There are ways of replacing ksubas, but until that's replaced, they're not allowed to be under the same roof, right? The ksuba. Some people hang their ksuba on the wall, other people keep it private, but either way, the woman has to know where her ksuba is. Now, it doesn't have to be on her person. She could keep it in a safe deposit box. She could give it to her mother. But she has to know where it is at all times. She doesn't have to have it with her, but she has to know where it is. So if they go on vacation, there's no chiyuv on the woman to take. Some women will take it, but there's no chiyuv to take the ksuba with her. But she has to know where it is. Yeah.
Have you ever seen like a slight technical error in the order of a chuppah, like what would the technical error be? Let's say like he doesn't pay for the $1 for the yichud room, or like they misorganize
Yeah,
the timing
well,
of something.
there are.
or they like don't forget to do something, or
Oh yeah. I mean, this happens.
what happened?
Well, it depends. Some things, if the mistake is made, you just let it go. In other words, b'diavad, it's valid. Some types of mistakes, you actually have to redo. I mean, there are times where I will tell you this, where the wedding, the ceremony was done improperly. And the rabbi would just call them in privately and kind of redo it privately. Now, you don't have to announce it to the people. You don't have to tell the whole crowd this was a puzzle marriage. But sometimes we have to redo it. Sometimes we say, hey, let's just... Which means we need two witnesses.
Right, okay.
Right? So we do have to have two. I mean, the rabbi can be one of the witnesses. The rabbi himself can be one of the witnesses. But we'll need at least one other witness.
You don't need 10 people there?
You do need 10 people, but if that would cause... you should have 10 people, actually. I mean, the chassan and the rabbi count for 2 of them. But you do need 8 other people. So.
They've already had children.
Well, you're talking about like it's a second marriage? Or?
No, like they realized something was not done right, but they already had children.
Well, listen, people getting remarried happens all the time. I mean, for example, intermarriages, right? We remarry them because they weren't married validly, or people who didn't have a religious marriage, 2 Jews. So yeah, you can marry people if they've had children. It's an interesting machlokas. For second marriages, should children go to second marriages? Meaning, let's say a couple got divorced, and then they're getting remarried. Should the children? Different people. Should the children from the first marriage go to the wedding of their parent in the second marriage? Different customs. Some people basically say that they should not, because that's kind of being unfaithful to their parents. Others say it's okay. I don't think you can give a definitive rule here. I think it depends on how people will be hurt or whatever it would be.
It's really interesting that you say that you have to redo a marriage sometimes, but if it wasn't done perfectly, because you hear so many stories, or not so many, but a few stories of how people like give someone something of value and say Harayach Mikdash, and there are 2 witnesses, and then they're considered married and they have to get a divorce.
Yeah, so that's kind of the opposite problem, meaning...
Right, but if it's so easy to get married by mistake,
so
then
easy.
How could you make a mistake in the whole marriage ceremony?
Well, that's a good point. The answer basically is that you have to err on the side of strictness in both directions, meaning to say, if we did something 95% right, but it was 5% off, we want to be 100% sure, so we'll do it again. On the other hand, if somebody did something that's 5% right and 95% wrong, we're going to say, maybe we're strict that it might be a good marriage. The point basically is you're always going to go on the strict side in both ways. But for example, if you didn't pay $1 for the yichud room, that probably wouldn't be a problem, because we assume that if you signed a contract with the wedding hall and they gave you the right to use the room, so that gave you your
And also he'll bring her into his house.
Yeah, but there won't be witnesses. That's the problem. In other words, to bring you to the house has to have witnesses, right? So that's why we need witnesses. The witnesses under the chuppah also have to watch. Right? Have you ever seen that? Have you ever seen how it works with the yichud room? The yichud room is you have the same 2 witnesses under the chuppah who saw the ring ceremony. They have to go. They have to escort the chassan and the kala in the yichud room. They have to inspect the yichud room to be sure there are no hidden doors or people hiding under beds, because it has to be private. So they do an inspection of the yichud room. Then they stand outside the door. The door is closed, and the chassan and the kala stay a minimum of like 7 minutes. They can stay longer, but and they eat. They also eat in there. They exchange gifts. Those are minhagim. Those are not halachos. But the witnesses have to stand outside the room to be sure that nobody comes in. And so bringing him to his house would be a problem in terms of yichud, because there are no witnesses there. Unless you bring witnesses to your house, and they do the same thing. Yeah.
I heard that if someone gambles, they can't be a witness. How is that true?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Yeah, that is true, but you have to define it. There are a lot of ways, a witness could be disqualified. Obviously, if he doesn't keep Shabbos, he's not kosher, etc. But one of the ways a witness is puzzle is if he bets, if he gambles. Gamblers are considered to be puzzle for witnesses, but we paskin that is only somebody who makes most of his income by gambling. Meaning, if he simply, notice he's a professional gambler. If he simply once in a while bets on a sports game or whatever it would be,
buys a lottery ticket,
or buys a lottery ticket, right? That will not disqualify him.
You're like, okay, so if he plays cards, it's not.
No. So that unless it's like maybe there are people who make a living from poker. In fact, there was a shaila, I think a yeshiva had recently. Some from guy, like won one of these poker championships, like $200,000, and he's such a tzaddik. He wants to give like all of it to a yeshiva. So the question is the yeshiva allowed to take
And can he be
money?
a witness? 'Cause that's what's still getting-
Well, could be. Maybe he couldn't be a witness if he makes his living from gambling. That is more of a problem. So
Why
it is.
wouldn't they be able to take the money though?
Huh?
Why wouldn't they be able to accept his tzedakah?
Well, because part of the idea is that money that is obtained by professional gambling is considered to be in a way stolen money. It's considered to be like gezel. So it's like a yeshiva shouldn't get money that was earned on Shabbos, right? I mean, there are a lot of things that you have to look at the source of the money. A tzedakah should not take money that was obtained by theft or by immoral behavior or by desecration of Shabbos or by gambling, which was violation of halacha. So the money is tainted money. So one should not take that money. Yeah.
Didn't we learn at the heart surgery that if somebody committed a sin, another Jew is allowed to benefit from it?
Right. That's very, very excellent comparison. The idea that just as if taking of the heart was forbidden, but once it was done, you're allowed to take it. So you want to say the same thing should be true for money that was earned improperly, but once the sin was done, why can't a yeshiva or tzedakah benefit? Excellent point. I need to think about it. It's a very excellent comparison. It's good. It's a very good point. But still, I do want to say that the halacha seems to be that if the money comes from a bad origin, now again, it could be that it's not a prohibition, but it was a righteous practice not to take things that. There is a concept that when you build kedusha, when you build Torah, when you build Chasidus, every aspect of it should be holy and pure. And if some aspect of it is not holy or pure, that may affect the whole thing. That's why, by the way, when they founded Mea Sharem, all these different communities in Yerushalayim, they insisted that religious Jews do all of the construction work. This goes back to the 1800s. This is not recent. Because they wanted, like tzaddikim, to do everything, to put down the bricks and put down the pipes, because they thought if you have influences that were not holy, that's going to affect the whole edifice. So there's probably something to do with that idea. Okay, alrighty. So let me just explain something about the reading the ksuba. So the truth of the matter is, there's no halachic reason to read a ksuba. A ksuba has to be signed. That's all. You sign it and give it. Why do you read it? There's no reason to read it. The only reason why we read the ksuba is we want to make a break between Eresin and Nisuin. So reading the ksuba is simply separating between two halves. You see? And that's why, in truth, a sermon or a drasha would be just as good. But the custom is to read the ksuba and maybe give a drasha too. But really, reading the ksuba does not have halachic significance. Writing and signing the ksuba is what is important, not the reading. Now, the reading ksuba can be a little delicate. I don't know if I talked about this, because the ksuba sharply differentiates between virgin brides and non-virgin brides. Frankly, there is more money in the ksuba that a husband would pay his wife if she's a basula than if she's not a basula. And the question becomes, all right, most people don't listen to a ksuba, most people don't understand a ksuba, ksuba's mumbled, whatever it will be. But for yeshiva people who are sensitive to ksuvas and they like to listen to the ksuvas, the reading of the ksuba publicly might create an invasion of privacy. I mean, let's assume a woman is a balas tshuva, and she's not a virgin, right? So the ksuva will reflect that. And you're reading it in front of 100 people. All right, so maybe 5 of them will understand it. But, so what do you do? What do you do about that? What if, for example, the woman is not a virgin, but she would prefer that not, she and her husband prefer that it not be mentioned in a public way. So the halacha permits that the ksuva can be read in a way that is different than it's written. Even if the ksuva says non-virgin, right? So that's actually my specialty. I get invited. No, it's kind of cute. I get invited to weddings where I don't know the chassan or the kala sometimes, but apparently I don't know. My reputation has spread that I'm able to ad lib a ksuva. Right? So they call me to just read it like a ksuva for a virgin, and everything will be fine. Right? So I've gotten a tiny reputation for that. But that is the halacha. The halacha is that you are permitted to ad lib. Now, what's a more serious question though is, well, can you write the ksuva for a virgin as long as the chassan is not being deceived? I mean, some have made a bigger argument. Instead of just ad-libbing it, where the ksuva says non-virgin, but you just read it, in a certain way, why can't you write the ksuva for a virgin? Now, if the chassan doesn't know, he's being deceived. But if the chassan knows and agrees, right? So some poskim have even permitted something much more, not only ad-libbing in the reading, but they have actually permitted writing besula in the ksuva, but that's a big machlokas poskim. So that would depend. I mean, the one who makes the decision is the rabbi who is marrying you. The Mesader Kedushin is the one who approves the form of the ksuva. So if this is an issue, this is something would be discussed with the Mesader Kedushin. Yeah.
Why would it make a difference to the chassan if she was a virgin or not? Like deceived based on what?
Well, it does make a difference. Again, emotionally, for some people, they want to be the first, so to speak. That they feel that the closeness will not be as intense. Now, again, no. Well, halachically, the difference is the amount of the ksuba. The ksuba is more, so halachically, it's a question of how much money. In fact, I just had a question. In fact, it was very, very interesting. I mean. A chassan who just got married 2 days ago approached me a week ago, like a few days before the wedding, saying he just discovered that his kala was not a basula, and it bothered him a lot. And whatever, we had to talk sense into him. But apparently, again, I'm not defending anything. I'm just saying that apparently, for some people, it is an emotional issue. And therefore, you have to be honest. People have to be honest. People just have to be honest. That's what's going on here. And honesty should be on both sides. I don't mean to suggest only women have to be honest. People should be honest. That's all. Because sometimes they can have even things that you think are not important can have repercussions. So these things, think about. Okay. So the reading of the ksuva is not really part of the ceremony. It's to make a break between erusin and nisuin. Okay. Now, the Sheva Brachos after the wedding meal are a different thing. Those are the same as the Sheva Brachos for the whole week, that you do that. Okay, that's part of the celebration of the wedding. Okay. Alrighty. All right, so you all take care, and I'm not sure if Rebbe Singer-Stetner told you this. I'm not going to be teaching you next week at the regular time. I think we're doing it at 7 p.m. Okay, so we will see you in the evening. Take care.
Thank you.
Okay.